In a world where everyone is constantly speaking, where opinions are hurled into the void like arrows shot in the dark, silence has become a rare and misunderstood art. You've probably heard it before. Silence is power. But how often have you used silence as a tool, only to find it didn't get you the results you wanted? Whether it's in relationships, in conflict, or in personal transformation, silence, when poorly understood, can fall flat. It can come across as indifference, weakness, confusion, or worse, apathy. But when used with purpose, silence is one of the most potent forces a Stoic can master. In this video, we'll explore the nuanced wisdom behind true, powerful silence. The kind that builds attraction, commands respect, and fosters personal growth. This is more than just a tactic. It's a philosophy. If you're tired of your silence being ignored, misunderstood, or misread, stay with me until the end. We'll not only uncover why your silence isn't working, we'll reshape it into something that can't be ignored. And if you resonate with Stoic strength, intentional growth, and depth in relationships, consider subscribing. Hit the like button to support this journey, and share this with someone who needs to reclaim the power of presence and the wisdom of restraint. Now, let's begin. 1. Silence must be intentional. Silence, when left unshaped, is chaos. A blank canvas without direction, a doorway with no threshold. Many people believe that by saying nothing, they are making a statement. But the truth is this: silence only becomes powerful when it is intentional, when it comes from clarity, not confusion, from wisdom, not withdrawal. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't merely embrace silence to avoid speaking. They practiced purposeful quietude as an expression of inner command. Think of Marcus Aurelius, whose meditations were private thoughts, never meant for an audience, and yet speak louder than armies. His silence wasn't retreat. It was the sound of a mind fully engaged in mastering itself. Let's bring that into the modern world. You go silent on someone you love. Maybe it's after a fight. Maybe you're trying to pull back, hoping they'll chase. Or maybe you just don't know what to say, so you don't say anything. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If you don't know why you're being silent, neither will they. Your silence becomes a void. And in that void, people project their own meanings: fear, resentment, indifference. The silence, instead of drawing them in, pushes them away. Intentional silence, on the other hand, is entirely different. It doesn't flee. It holds ground. It isn't born out of passive confusion, but active reflection. When someone deeply connected to themselves chooses to be silent, it doesn't feel like distance. It feels like depth. It makes others pause, reflect, wonder. Intentional silence is a message in itself. It says, I know who I am. I am not reactive. I don't chase chaos. I listen. I watch. I think. And when I speak, it will matter. But most people, they aren't silent to regain control. They're silent because they've lost it. And here's where we get it wrong. In relationships, we think that by saying nothing, we're sending a clear message. But unless that message is anchored in clarity and strength, it collapses. Silence without reason is just absence. Silence with reason is presence in its most refined form. So how do you make your silence intentional? Start by defining your why. Are you choosing silence because you need time to think clearly? Because you refuse to add fuel to a fire? Because you've already spoken with clarity, and now it's time to let your actions echo? Write it down, know it, Own it. Intentional silence is not an escape. It's a strategy. And every strategy must have a purpose. Second, hold yourself to a higher standard in that silence. What are you doing with the space you've created? Are you using it to ruminate and stew in bitterness? Or are you using it to elevate, reading, reflecting, training, growing? Intentional silence isn't just about not speaking. It's about doing something deeper in place of speech. When Epictetus told us we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak, he wasn't advocating for passivity. He was pointing toward a discipline of awareness. The quiet Stoic doesn't retreat from the world. He listens to it, studies it, responds only when needed, and with precision. This kind of silence sharpens the soul. It prepares you for when words must be spoken, and ensures they strike with clarity, not noise. Now let's take this into the real world again. You're in a relationship where words have been exhausted. Arguments run in circles. Or maybe you've decided to walk away, but you're tempted to explain, to text, to justify. That's the moment where silence can become your most articulate sentence if it's grounded in intent, if it comes from a place of dignity, not drama. Because here's the paradox. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting, but only when the one who holds it is anchored. If your silence is anchored in self-respect, it becomes magnetic. If it's anchored in confusion or avoidance, it becomes noise just with the volume turned down. There's a subtle but crucial difference, and it begins with you. Because intentional silence is self-contained. It doesn't beg for recognition. It doesn't demand understanding. It simply exists as a form of presence, powerful enough to shift dynamics, awaken curiosity, and restore clarity. So the next time you go quiet, ask yourself this: am I retreating or am I rising? Let your silence be a mirror of your strength, not your fear. Let it be a conscious tool, not an unconscious reaction. And remember this: words often demand attention, but silence, when used well, commands it. Let's take a breath here. If you've ever used silence, hoping it would make someone miss you, or to teach them a lesson, but it ended up backfiring, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. What did you learn? What will you do differently next time? And if you're ready to commit to intentional silence, not the kind that hides, but the kind that builds, write this in the comments right now. I will rise through restraint. Let's keep going. The next piece is crucial. 2. The difference between silence and indifference. There is a fine line, razor thin, between being silent with purpose and being silent because you no longer care. And here's where so many people lose the power they hoped to gain through silence. They drift across that line unknowingly. Indifference is not wisdom. It is not restraint. It is the absence of connection, not the presence of strength. And it is often mistaken for stoicism, when in truth, it's its hollow impersonation. Let's clarify something now, before we go further. Stoicism is not about feeling nothing. It is about not being ruled by what you feel. To detach is not to become numb. To be silent is not to cease caring. The Stoic does not close his heart. He tempers it. He masters it. He refines it until emotion no longer controls him, but becomes a force he can direct. Indifference, on the other hand, is a form of decay. It signals that something has died in the dynamic, be it attention, effort, or emotional investment. And when you go silent out of indifference, you may believe you're rising above the situation. But in reality, you're abandoning it. You are escaping, not elevating. Think of a fire. Intentional silence is like the act of tending to that fire from a distance, giving it space to breathe, to reignite, to return with focus. Indifference, by contrast, is walking away while it burns out. But here's where it gets tricky. The external appearance of both looks similar. In both cases, you're not speaking. You're not reacting. You're not chasing. But beneath the surface, the energy is radically different. Intentional silence still holds presence. It still holds awareness. It still cares, even if that care is expressed through distance. Indifference feels cold, absent, void. It drains the room of warmth, of connection, of curiosity. And that difference, while subtle, is felt deeply by those around you. This is why silence often backfires. You try to be strong and pull back. You stop texting. You stop checking in. You wait. But it doesn't spark curiosity. It doesn't build attraction. It doesn't restore tension. Instead, it's received as detachment, as if you've given up, because that's how it's felt. You may still care, but your silence, stripped of intent, begins to resemble apathy. And apathy is far more dangerous than anger. People can argue with anger. They can respond to passion. But apathy, that's the dead zone, and no one chases what feels dead. In relationships especially, this is a fatal misunderstanding. You pull back, not to punish, but to create space. You're hoping they notice your absence. But you fail to express why, and your emotional energy disappears, replaced by vacancy. If the other person feels that your silence stems from indifference, they will not be drawn in. They will be repelled. What does intentional silence do differently? It holds an energetic charge. Even without speaking, it says, I am still present. I am still here. But I am choosing to watch, to wait, to strengthen myself. There's an energy behind it. It doesn't feel like absence. It feels like restraint. Indifference, by contrast, has no charge. It is static, flat, hollow. So how do you ensure your silence never falls into the trap of indifference? You stay connected to yourself first, and then to the situation, through awareness and conscious intent. You don't go silent and then numb out with distraction. You don't disappear and stew in resentment. You choose silence with the full understanding of why you are silent and what you want that silence to say. This is a meditation, in many ways. A silent form of communication. The energy you hold while being silent matters as much as the words you don't speak. If you walk into a room and say nothing, but your eyes, your posture, your energy radiate presence, people feel you. If you say nothing and drift away, collapsing into your own indifference, people forget you. The Stoic silence is not an emotional shutdown. It is emotional discipline. And this is especially important in today's world of surface-level interactions and instant gratification. The silence of the disciplined man stands out, not because it is loud, but because it is alive. It is rich with observation. It listens, it studies, it waits, and when it acts, it moves with force. Now, I ask you to reflect. Have you confused indifference for strength? Have you used silence as a shield to avoid confrontation, instead of a scalpel to cut away the unnecessary? Have you gone quiet, not to grow, but to escape? Be honest with yourself. Because if you are to reclaim the power of silence, you must first strip away its counterfeit. You must make sure that your quiet is not a form of emotional laziness, but of refined control. That's life. Let me ask you something here. Have you ever gone silent, thinking you were being strong, only to later realize you had simply checked out emotionally? Drop a comment and share your insight or your wake-up call. And if you're committing now to be present, even in your silence, I invite you to write this below. I choose presence over passivity. Let's move deeper. 3. When words lose power, silence gains it. There comes a point, whether in conflict, persuasion, or even love, when words begin to lose their power. You speak, you explain, you argue, you plead, and at some point your words, once sharp and meaningful, dissolve into background noise. This is the point where silence doesn't just become powerful, it becomes necessary. You must understand that words operate like a currency. The more they're spent without purpose, the more they devalue. And once you've said too much, clarity begins to fade. Authority starts to vanish. Desperation takes its place. When words are overused, they start working against you. Let's use a metaphor here. Picture a river. A gentle current of words can water the soil of a relationship, nourishing it, sustaining it. But an endless flood, it drowns everything. The same force that gives life can also suffocate. So many people try to talk their way into resolution, into forgiveness, into love. They keep speaking, hoping that just one more explanation, one more clarification, one more desperate confession will finally land. But there is a hidden threshold, unspoken, invisible, beyond which every additional word weakens the message. Your effort turns from strength to noise, from vulnerability to insecurity. That's when silence must step in. Because silence does what over-explaining never can. It restores gravity when your words have lost their effect. Silence becomes the only thing that can make people feel you again. This is not about playing games. This is about re-establishing emotional tension. The kind of tension that commands attention, curiosity, and reflection. Silence reintroduces mystery. It forces the other person to stop tuning you out and start wondering. It creates space, not to manipulate, but to reset the frequency of communication, to change the rhythm, to allow the weight of what's already been said to finally land. This is why the Stoics practiced brevity, why they favored clarity over quantity. Because words once spoken can't be taken back, and they are most powerful when they are deliberate. There is nothing less stoic than the need to keep explaining yourself endlessly. The more a man speaks just to be understood, the more he loses himself. When you reach the point where your words have lost value, the greatest thing you can do is stop, withdraw, observe, let the silence grow roots. In this stillness, your energy speaks louder than your language ever could. Because when you are silent, people are forced to pay attention to everything else. Your actions, your presence, your boundaries, your alignment. They begin to notice things they once ignored. They feel the weight of your absence, not just physically, but energetically. And most importantly, you begin to notice yourself again. You stop repeating your pain. You stop reliving the conflict. And you start remembering what you stand for. In that silence, you reclaim clarity. And clarity is the root of all power. Now there is a danger here too. Because some will take silence as rejection, as emotional neglect. So the question becomes, when is it time to stop speaking and start holding silence? The answer is simple. When you've said enough to be understood, and yet nothing changes. That's when silence becomes not a void, but a mirror. A mirror held up to the situation saying, this is where we are. I will not repeat myself. I will not dilute my truth by restating it endlessly. The next move is no longer mine. This is the moment where silence becomes a boundary. And a boundary, when rooted in strength and not spite, is sacred. So stop speaking when your voice is no longer heard. Not out of defeat, but out of dignity. Stop explaining when you've already been clear. Not out of exhaustion, but out of elevation. Because there is a moment in every dynamic, romantic, professional, personal, where the wisest thing you can say is nothing at all. Why? I want to hear from you. Have you ever reached that threshold where more talking only made things worse? Where silence finally brought the clarity you couldn't find with words? Share your experience below. Or, if you're ready to cut through the noise in your life, affirm this in the comments. I speak with purpose. I hold silence with power. Next, we'll explore one of the most underestimated aspects of human connection, the curiosity that only absence can awaken. Let's continue. 4. Create curiosity through absence. There is an unspoken tension between presence and absence. Too much presence, and people grow numb to you. Too much absence, and they forget you. But when used with precision, absence is a powerful tool because it creates curiosity. And curiosity is the beginning of desire. You must understand that human beings are wired to value mystery. What we cannot fully grasp, we pursue. What we see too often, we take for granted. This is not cynicism. It is reality. Familiarity, when unchecked, breeds indifference. That which is always available becomes invisible. The Stoics taught detachment not to inspire coldness, but to ensure that we never cling too tightly to anything, not to people, not to outcomes, not even to ideas. Why? Because clinging chokes. It kills the natural rhythm between approach and retreat, between showing up and stepping back. And in the realm of relationships, nothing extinguishes attraction faster than overexposure. Absence creates a vacuum, and the human mind abhors a vacuum. It rushes to fill it with questions, with reflection, with new awareness. When you deliberately step back, not out of spite, not to manipulate, but to recalibrate, you invite the other person to come forward. You create space for their awareness to awaken. You become a question, not a statement. Let me give you an example. A man sends long messages to his partner every day. At first, it's sweet. She feels seen, valued. But over time, the messages begin to blur. She stops reading every word. She starts replying later. His presence, once magnetic, now feels predictable. So, he sends more, longer messages, more frequent check-ins. He tries to make himself impossible to ignore, unaware that he's already becoming easy to overlook. Now, imagine this. One day, he stops. He doesn't disappear. He simply withdraws his constant reach. No anger, no announcement, just space. And suddenly, there's a void. She looks for his message. It's not there. A day passes, then 2. She begins to wonder. Not in panic, but in awareness. This isn't a game. It's a reset. A reminder that attention should not be assumed. It must be earned, reciprocated, balanced. Absence, when wielded wisely, becomes a form of signal. It says, I am not a fixture. I am a flame. Tend to me, or I will dim. But be warned, not all absence creates curiosity. Only intentional absence, grounded in inner certainty and self-respect, invites intrigue. Absence born of insecurity or pettiness, on the other hand, repels. So how do you create curiosity through absence without falling into manipulation? The answer lies in energy management. You withdraw not to punish, but to replenish. You don't chase, you observe. You don't explain your absence. You allow your absence to speak for you. You let silence and distance deliver the message that words never could. I value myself enough to step back when energy isn't reciprocated. This kind of absence draws attention. It doesn't beg, it invites. The most confident people in any room are not the loudest. They are the ones who can leave and still be felt. That's the goal. To become the kind of person whose absence lingers. Not because you've withheld affection, but because your presence was once full of intention, warmth, and clarity. When you step back, it creates contrast. The lack of you becomes noticeable, memorable. But let's be even more honest. Sometimes people don't notice your absence. Sometimes they don't chase. That's not a failure, it's a revelation. If your absence doesn't stir awareness in someone, it tells you something you could never learn by staying present. It shows you where the emotional imbalance lies. And that knowledge is priceless. Absence reveals truth. It either creates curiosity or it exposes disconnection. Either way, you win. The Stoic is not afraid to disappear because he knows that disappearance is not always loss. It is often clarity in disguise. And here's the paradox. Those who master the art of intentional absence never need to chase. They are remembered, sought after, because their presence has weight and their silence has meaning. Let's open this up. Has there ever been a time when stepping back taught you more than staying close ever could? When your absence revealed the truth of a relationship, a dynamic, or your own value? Share your story below. And if you're ready to practice absence with strength, not to manipulate, but to reveal, write this in the comments. My absence has meaning because my presence has value. Let's move forward. 5. Back your silence with strength. Silence without strength is just avoidance. It is a hollow gesture, empty of power, empty of presence. If your silence is not reinforced by your actions, your posture, your purpose, then it will collapse under its own weight. Silence must never be your only weapon. It must be the edge of a larger arsenal, composed of discipline, clarity, and direction. Let's break this down. When you go silent, especially in conflict or relationship dynamics, people immediately look for context. They look for what your silence means. And they don't just listen for an explanation. They watch for one. They observe your behavior, your choices, your energy. If your silence is followed by anxiety, frantic behavior, mixed signals, or passive aggression, it loses all credibility. It doesn't inspire respect. It creates confusion. But if your silence is backed by action, deliberate action, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes strength, because silence alone is ambiguous. But silence paired with visible self-respect is undeniable. You stop responding, and you start showing. You show through the way you hold yourself, through the way you continue building, through the way you pour into your craft, your body, your mind, through the way you walk away from things that insult your peace. This is how you shift the power dynamic. You stop being a ghost hoping to haunt someone into missing you, and you become a force whose presence is too rich to forget. Even in absence, the Stoic doesn't just retreat into silence to avoid conflict. He enters it willingly, when needed, but never stays there longer than necessary. He understands that his energy is finite, that his time is valuable, that his growth must continue, regardless of what storms surround him. When Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journals, he didn't write to be heard. He wrote to clarify his soul. His silence wasn't withdrawal. It was preparation. That's what we must all strive for, to make silence a moment of refinement, not regression. When you are silent, people should feel your momentum. Even if they don't hear your voice, they should see the change, feel the shift, sense the evolution. Because a man who goes quiet and grows is more powerful than one who screams and stays the same. But that growth must be real, not performative. Don't just post quotes and hope they notice. Don't disappear, only to return unchanged. Disappear and become something new. Because nothing speaks louder than transformation. When someone feels your absence and sees your glow rising elsewhere, that's when silence stings. Not because it's meant to hurt, but because it reflects contrast. The you that once chased is now focused. The you that once explained is now building. And let's be brutally honest. If your silence isn't anchored in transformation, then you're just waiting. Waiting is passive. Growth is active. This is the difference between stillness and stagnation. Stillness is conscious, chosen, purposeful. Stagnation is unconscious, default, powerless. So ask yourself, what are you doing in the quiet? Are you training your body, honing your mind, redefining your standards? Are you becoming someone whose silence carries weight? Or are you hoping your silence alone will do the work you aren't willing to do? The Stoic knows that action is the foundation of all influence. Even in silence, he is working. Even in stillness, he is sharpening. Even in absence, he is rising. This is how you back your silence with strength. By ensuring that the version of you that reemerges is undeniable, unshakable, unrecognizable to the one who once needed to be heard just to feel seen. Let the silence speak, but let your growth roar. Let me ask you something here. What are you building in your silence right now? What will your absence reveal about your standards, your evolution, your power? Drop your answers below. Or, if you're ready to make your silence unignorable, affirm this in the comments. In silence, I build. In growth, I return. Now let's turn inward. Because the next step is about shifting the center of gravity away from them and fully toward you. 6. Redirect focus to self-growth. Silence on its own will not save you, nor will it bring them back. Fix the conflict, or repair the cracks in your identity. Silence is only the first step. What follows must be something far more powerful: growth. Because when you stop pouring your energy outward into arguing, into pleading, into trying to be understood, you are left with a choice. Either that energy festers, or it gets redirected. That's the Stoic moment. That's the inner pivot that transforms silence from a dead end into a crucible, a forge, a workshop of the soul. When Epictetus told us it's not what happens to you but how you react to it that matters, he was pointing toward this principle. When life, relationships, and people fall silent, that is when you speak inwardly. That is when growth takes the mic. Because the truth is brutal, and it is liberating. No amount of silence will change others. The only thing it can guarantee is the opportunity to change yourself. But here's what most people do instead. They stew. They fantasize about revenge. They mentally replay what they should have said. They become obsessed with who's thinking about them, who's watching, who's moved on. Their silence becomes a stage for self-pity. That is not Stoicism. That is stagnation in disguise. A Stoic silence is full, not empty. It is a conscious reallocation of energy. You stop speaking, so you can start refining. You go quiet, not to be passive, but to go deeper into yourself, into your vision, your standards, your purpose. Because if you've just ended a relationship, if you've pulled away from drama, if you've chosen distance to preserve your peace, then this is the time to fill that void with the fire of becoming. Not becoming someone for them to want, becoming someone you respect. Silence is space. Growth is what fills it. And when you grow with intention, your silence no longer says, "I'm gone." It says, "I'm busy becoming." Let's be more specific. What does redirecting focus to growth actually look like? It looks like setting rituals, morning routines that ground you, physical training that sharpens your will, reading, journaling, listening to philosophy, not as escapism but as excavation. You dig into the parts of yourself that are unrefined, untested, unclear. It means asking hard questions. What patterns did I repeat in that relationship? What part of me needed validation so badly that I forgot my worth? Where have I been tolerating mediocrity in others and in myself? And it means answering those questions with action. The Stoics were not theorists locked in ivory towers. They were warriors of the soul, men who believed that character was something to be trained daily, and their silence was merely the space in which that training deepened. So your silence must be filled with movement. Don't just scroll. Build. Don't just wait. Learn. Don't just disappear. Reforge. The people who inspire us, those rare individuals whose energy changes the room, whose presence commands attention even in absence, they are not born. They are built in private, in silence, through sweat, clarity, pain, and patience. But here's the twist. You won't see results right away. Growth, real growth, is invisible for a while. You may feel stuck. You may wonder if anything is changing. But day by day, layer by layer, something new is forming beneath the surface. A self that no longer needs to prove. A self that no longer fears letting go. A self that is complete with or without the audience. This is the true Stoic victory. Not in being noticed, not in being chased, but in becoming so aligned, so clear, so focused, that your silence no longer waits for validation. It simply is. It radiates. And those who are meant to find you in that silence will. Those who don't were only ever drawn to your noise. So take this moment, this chapter of quiet, and build something no one can take from you. Because the silence of a growing person is louder than the noise of the world. Oh, now, I want to hear from you. If you're in a season of silence right now, what are you choosing to grow? Where is your energy going instead of outward? Drop it in the comments. And if you're committing now to turn your silence into fuel for growth, write this below. My silence is not absence. It is elevation. Onward. 7. Timing and energy are everything. Silence, to be effective, must not only be intentional, it must be well-timed. Like a blade drawn too early, it can wound without wisdom. Like a blade drawn too late, it becomes meaningless. Timing is everything. Energy is everything. Because silence, deployed at the wrong moment or with the wrong intent, not only loses its edge, it damages your credibility. And in the realm of Stoicism, credibility is capital. Let's unpack this. In relationships, many people try to use silence as a tool of leverage. They go quiet after a fight, thinking it will shift the dynamic. But if this silence is reactive, driven by anger, pride, or fear, it becomes transparent. The other person feels the manipulation. The timing is off. You can't slam the door and call it strategy. True Stoic silence is never reactive. It is not time to punish, it is time to recalibrate. If you go silent too soon before you've spoken your truth clearly, before you've set your boundary, you leave others confused. If you go silent too late after you've said too much, begged too long, defended yourself endlessly, your withdrawal lacks impact. It feels performative, empty. But when you speak with intention and then withdraw to let the message land, that's when silence becomes a force. It's a rhythm. Think of it musically. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's a beat, a pause between notes. It creates structure, anticipation, and space for meaning. The same applies to your energy. If your silence is delivered with low energy, if it comes from defeat, despair, or depletion, it feels flat. People can tell when your silence is powered by brokenness. But if your silence is supported by focused energy, by discipline, peace, and strength, it creates presence. Even without saying a word, you can't fake this. Energy doesn't lie. And this is where many people miss the mark. They confuse emotional shutdown with stoic restraint. But the former is chaotic. It's unresolved. It's noisy on the inside. Stoic silence is the opposite. It is rooted, calm, energized with clarity. So how do you align timing and energy? You must first listen inwardly. Before you pull away, ask, have I spoken with integrity? Have I communicated clearly and without neediness? Am I now choosing silence to protect my peace, not to provoke a reaction? If the answer is yes, your silence will land with impact. If not, it will feel like punishment. Or worse, manipulation. Second, align your internal state. Silence without internal harmony becomes a prison. Silence with aligned energy becomes a sanctuary. So build that energy. Move your body, meditate, breathe deeply, reflect on your values, reaffirm your standards, and most importantly, hold your silence with posture. Not just physical posture, but energetic posture. That quiet knowing that you are not withholding out of weakness, but out of wisdom. People can feel this. They feel when your silence is full of peace. They feel when your timing is steady, not dramatic. And in that rhythm they begin to respond, not to your noise, but to your gravity. This is why energy management is core to Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, in the midst of wars, betrayals, and burdens, often reminded himself to return to the breath, to the present, to the unshakable internal rhythm that no external storm could touch. You must do the same. In every silence, you are sending a message. Make sure that message is not, I am lost, but I am focused. Make sure the timing isn't out of impulse, but out of alignment. Because those who master when and how to be silent become masters of influence, not through force, but through frequency. Not through control, but through clarity. Now it's your turn. Have you ever timed your silence perfectly and watched it create a shift? Or have you misused silence and seen it lose power? Share your story in the comments. And if you're ready to time your silence with energy and wisdom, write this: my silence is rhythm. My energy is calm. Next, we approach the final threshold, where silence becomes more than a withdrawal. It becomes a return, a rise. 8. Don't just disappear. Elevate. There's a tragic misconception in modern culture that silence is enough. That disappearing, ghosting, stepping back, or going no contact on its own somehow creates gravity. That vanishing from someone's life is a form of power. But here's the truth: disappearance alone is forgettable. If you simply fall silent, vanish into the background, or withdraw without evolution, the world doesn't stop spinning. People don't always come chasing. In fact, Many times they move on because you left a void and never replaced it with anything greater. That's why in Stoicism, silence is never the destination. It's the gateway to elevation. If you choose to go silent, you must also choose to rise. Don't just disappear. Emerge transformed. This is the essence of the Stoic path. Not merely to step back from chaos, but to reforge yourself in that quiet. Not merely to pull away from others, but to rise above your old self. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius dealt with betrayal, political pressure, and deep personal loss. And yet, in his reflections, there is no bitterness. There is only self-mastery. In his silence, he didn't retreat from the world. He rose within it, not loudly, but steadily. When you disappear without growth, it's just avoidance. But when you disappear to evolve, that absence becomes sacred. You are not gone. You are becoming. And when you return not to prove anything, but simply to exist as you are now, your presence becomes undeniable. It demands no explanation, no speech, no announcement. Your silence ends with your becoming. Let's be clear. Elevation is not about showing off. It is not a transformation meant to impress others. It is not revenge. It is release. You elevate for you. You elevate because your peace became more important than the noise. Because your purpose grew louder than your ego. Because your future mattered more than your past. This is what makes silence powerful. Not the act of muting yourself, but the internal ascension that happens when no one's watching. Elevation is not aesthetic. It's internal. You're sharper, more composed. You don't argue anymore. You don't seek to be heard by those unwilling to listen. You stop chasing closure. You become it. You stop needing recognition, validation, or reconciliation. You have risen above the need for permission to thrive. This is the end game of Stoic silence. Not a dramatic exit, but a quiet arrival into your own sovereignty. But it's important to be honest with yourself. Are you truly elevating? Or are you just hiding? Are you building in the shadows? Or simply hoping time will fix what effort hasn't touched? Disappearing without elevation is just absence. Disappearing with elevation is transformation, and that transformation speaks volumes. It reconnects you with your own worth. It aligns you with your own integrity. It reintroduces you to yourself, not as the reactive version you once were, but as the composed, grounded, deeply unshakable version you've always meant to become. So don't just disappear to teach someone a lesson. Disappear to learn one. Don't just go silent to control the narrative. Go silent to rewrite your own. And when you return, not to them, but to life itself, you'll carry something silence alone could never achieve. A new self. That's life. Have you ever used a chapter of silence to completely rebuild? What changed? How did you re-enter the world? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments. And if you're ready to rise, not retreat, say it below. I don't disappear, I evolve. Now let's bring this home. Conclusion. We've reached the end of this journey together. But in truth, we've only opened the door to something deeper. You came here wondering why your silence wasn't working. And what you've seen, I hope, is that silence on its own is never the answer. Silence is not a weapon to wound. It's not a strategy to win. It's a discipline, a mirror, a crucible for growth. When done right, silence is not absence. It is presence turned inward. It is a sacred withdrawal, not to escape, but to elevate, to refine your focus, to sharpen your mind, to align your values. We've covered it all. That silence must be intentional, that it should never be confused with indifference, that when words lose power, silence can restore gravity. That absence creates curiosity, but only if it's earned. That your silence must be backed by strength, not weakness. That this is your chance to redirect focus to self-growth. That timing and energy determine whether your silence speaks or confuses. And finally, that the point is not to disappear. The point is to rise. And now, you're at a crossroads. You can fall back into the same patterns, waiting, watching, hoping. Or you can use this silence to step into something more permanent, something unshakable, something unmistakably you. If you found clarity, strength, or direction in what we've explored today, I invite you to subscribe to the Everlasting Stoic. We're not here to play games. We're not here to manipulate emotions. We are here to rise. Like, share, and comment if this resonated. Let the algorithm be the wind behind our mission, to bring depth back into a surface-level world. And before you go, drop this in the comments if you're committing now, not just to silence, but to evolution. I rise in silence and return with purpose. Stay grounded, stay focused, and never forget, your silence isn't working until you. See you in the next one.